Sefer Yehושע, Parak Aleph, Pasuk Yud Aleph. Ivru b'Bekarav HaMachana, should go through the Machana, pass through the Machana, the camp of Klal Yisrael, וצוו לאמר, and command the nation, saying like this: הכינו לכם צידה, prepare yourself. צידה, Rashi says, kol davar hatzarich l'derech, anything that you need for the road, ukli zaynam l'malchama, or any weapons that you would need to fight the war, amalhem l'sak, and he told them to prepare. Because if you're going to tell me that they need food and drinks, the mun was still falling in Tez Zayin ben Nisan, and this was at least a few days before Yud Nisan. This was Zayin Nisan. This is right after this is around the Tkufa of Shleshet of Moshe Rabbeinu, like we spoke last time. And it says that the next day, that's when the month stopped. Because in another 3 days you're going to be passing through the Yarden. This Yarden, which we spoke about in an earlier shir, it's to go and conquer the land that Hashem, our God, is giving to you to inherit. You're going to be here for another 3 days, so then you're going to pass through the Yarden and go into Eretz Yisrael. Zok the Radak, Hechinu lechem tzeda pirush, mine machalim zelasi alechem, other foods besides for bread. Ki adayin hayer lam aman b'chal makom sheyunosim. Kolzman, they were traveling, they still had the man with them. Ad mimachar sa Pesach, until the day after Pesach, Tesai Nisan, like Rashi says. Lefi masha omer Rabbi Seinu Zal. This is what the Gemara says in Kedusha Naflam and Ches. The Gemara says that the month didn't fall after Zayin Nisan, at Zayin Adar, because after the mon was Yerid, was Chusay Shal Moshe, and once Moshe is no longer here, there's no more mon. But the day that Moshe was nifter, the mon fell, and it lasted them until Tez Zayin Nisan, that they should have enough food to eat until then. The Tzida says, וצוו, even though this parasha is mentioned before Yeshua sent the meraglim to Eretz Yisrael, really the truth is that the tzivui was after he sent the meraglim, because the day that he sent the meraglim, they rested in Yerichai, and they stopped for 3 days, and when they came back, they rested in their place. And the day after that, they rested by the Yarden. So it was before. There's a big shaila in the cheshbon of what was going on over here. The Goin also takes issue with this, of when exactly it happened. But Pasha Simatu, this is going with the Goin over here also, that this happened after the Tzivei, the Meraglim, which we'll get to at the beginning of Parak Beis. Hechinu, you should be making for yourself, because they were still eating the man. It wasn't just that they were eating for the man, but they were also eating from other fruits and vegetables. They would buy food from the Goyim, that they would, the merchants that would come and buy things and sell things. So Yeshua is telling them to take this food that they're buying from the Goyim and be able to use that. So we have to understand a bunch of different things over here. What's Ivru b'Bekarav HaMachana? Why not Ivru b'Machana? What's Bekarav HaMachana? It sounds like to go through the Machana, to go within the Machana. וצוו לאמar. The ikar nakud of this pasuk is the tzivui to be mechen, tzivui to make the achana for going into Eretz Yisrael, is with kol davar hatzarich l'derech, and the klezayin l'malchama, and b'maichel b'mishta. Rashi says they didn't need that. The chayra, the man, was from Maichel. Where do they have mishta from? It's also madna. And let's see, let's explore this a little bit and try to be miyashiv some of these questions that we have. We could say the enechinami, if they wouldn't be getting the food from the man, then the pasuk would be understood to mean that they should, cook and bake and take care of any other achila that they need. So Shema Minah from here, we see from here that there's something specific about when people go out to war that they should eat and they should be well fed. Because if not, then what's the chiddush of being making the food for them? If they were stamazay traveling, we know when they left Mitzrayim, they took food with them also. So what's the chiddush over here? That they had to have a specific tzivoy that they're going to Milchama, they're going into Eretz Yisrael, that they need to take food with them. So l'chara it's pashut when anybody travels anywhere, even if you go for an hour in the car, you take a bag of potato chips or something. Here they're going into Eretz Yisrael, mechatesi, that they shouldn't take food with them, unless you want to say that the pshat is that the kedusha ha'aretz is so strong that we don't want to take any food from chutz la'aretz with them. And we know from Chazal, we said before, that they were mistapek from the man until Tezai and Nisan. But l'chara, there's much more here, and this is what we're going to discuss. The first nikuda. So, the Radak says that there were mine machalim besides for lechem. Ki adayin hayard lehem amon. The man was still falling for them. B'chal makom sheinosim ad b'machos haPesach. So it's a shaila. It sounds like it's not so clear. From the Radak, it sounds like the man was still falling until machos haPesach, until Tesayin. But it's mashra from the Gemara. However you can understand it, but it was still, the man lasted in some oifen from Zayin Adar until Tesayin Nisan. These 5 weeks, Baruch. So the question is, did the man actually fall during this tkufa, or they just had man, they were mistapik from the man, they were able to take from the man until Tesayin Nisan. But l'chayra, the idea is that the pasuk is teaching us that when you go to Milchama to prepare food for you, to make sure that they're not going to go hungry, because you find the Sefer Sheftim, Perek Zayin, before Gideon and 300 people went to Milchama with Midian, the pasuk says, "Vayirchu es tzeda ha'am b'yadam v'shofar seim." They went to war with the food in their hands and their shofars. And the Metuda says over there that tzeda is mazon. I mean, Rashi does stick in that they're taking the klei zayin also, which means that they're going to be going to war. Meaning the pasuk is not saying over here, "Ivur b'karav hamachana," and you're going to go to war. But achinu lechem tzedek yibayt sheshes yom atem over mes hayarden. There was an understanding altogether that they were going to go, that after the Chet HaMeraglim, that the way they're going to have to go to Eretz Yisrael and conquer Eretz Yisrael is through a regular physical gashmistic milchama, and they have to prepare with the ishtadlus of a regular milchama, so they have to take weapons with them also. But if they wouldn't have been chayte, as I state in Rashi at the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, that if they wouldn't have been chayte with the meraglim, they would have just came to Eretz Yisrael, and all of the goyim would have ran away. It would have been an easy job. And now we find in Sefer Sheftim, Baramaisa Pilagish Begiva, towards the end of Sefer Sheftim, Capital Chaf, it says, "V'lakachnu asara anoshim l'mei l'chol shiftei Yisrael l'mei l'elef elef l'rvava l'kachas tzeda l'am l'lasis l'bayin l'keva benyamin k'chol ha'naval ashrasa b'Yisrael." It says that when they went to the Milchama by Pilagish Begiva, they also took tzeda with them. So tzeda sounds like it means food, but also means klei zayin, like Rashi says. And by Milchama of Sedaim in Sefer Bereshis, by Yichu es kol rechush Sedaim v'Amarav es kol ochlam v'yilechu. Doesn't use the term tzeda, but it says that they took all the food with them. Milvad rechush, besides for all the rechush that they took from Sedaim and Amarav, they took all the food. What's the idea that they took the food for the Milchamas in the Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah? Mem Bei Zayin says es kol ochlam. Reb Nechemia Omer elu ha'kaisavos. These are the dates. They would bring dates to the Milchama. And then the Tzivin Mektavar explains that the earlier minig was that when the nations would fight with each other, they would take, besides for the etzem weapons and artillery that they needed for the war, they would also take a lot of their treasures to show off, I guess, to the other nations, and to show that, we're going to capture you and take you captive, and you'll become a shubba to us. There's a Gavaldige Sefer on Yerushalmi called Ale Tamar. It's phenomenal, Bekiyas, and very Gishmaka, Mar Makaimis and Zachin, and there he brings, in Yerushalmi Yuma, he brings that when the Anshe Sedaim went to Milchama, it's going back on this pasuk, Vayichu es kol rechush Sedaim v'Amarav es kol ochlam v'yilechu, it says that when the Anshe Sedaim went to Milchama, they took Tamarim with them, they took dates with them, because they had they took a tremendous amount of dates with them. Because when you're fighting a war, you don't have time to sit down and eat, and you need to eat something that's very nutritious. And we know from Gemaras throughout that dates are very satisfying. The Gemara says it's like lechem, even la'alacha. There's nafkeminas that kaisevis is like lechem. The Gemara in Brachos Daf Beis, and the Gemara in Ksubas Daf Yudam Beis goes through a whole list of zaken that tomorrow are good for. And it says over here, this Sefer brings in from the Yerushalmi and Yuma, on the Yerushalmi and Yuma, that they tomorrow prevent bulmus. Bulmus is some type of diabetes that people who get in those days. You know, David HaMelech had that when they gave him the lechem aparim to eat, which is a whole shaylan of itself. And if a person was feeling that he was getting a bulmus, so then he would quickly eat the kaisavais, he would eat the dates, and it would save him, and he would be able to fight. It was a very practical food that they would take with them to the Mulchama to be able to protect themselves and stay healthy and stay gesund, and to have koyach to be able to fight against the enemies. And it was easy for them to carry. If you're bringing bread, and you're going to have to sit down and make sandwiches, and you would have to bring a lot of them. It was very easy to store the dates, and it was very simple, and they were able to take that to the war, and that was the mahalach that they used to use. And we find through Chazal Stam B'Shvach HaTmorim, the Chazal praise dates in a lot of places, like the Gemara says in Psachim and Daf Peizayin Mudbeis. Shlagolu Yisrael above Al Kadesh Yechlu Tmorim. The reason why Klal Yisrael were sent to Golus into Bavel specifically is so that they should eat Tmorim. But the concept is they should ask about Torah and eat Tmorim. The concept is that it should be something that they were familiar with, because Eretz Yisrael was has the Shivas Aminim, and that's the 7 ideas. Again, it's connected to the Sheva Amim that are in Eretz Yisrael, and I believe this form go through which nation is connected, which peri over there. Even though we know that the Tamarmar from the Shivas Aminim from Shtabuch B'Hem Eretz Yisrael, the concept of why they grow in Chutz La'aretz is only because of the Kedushas Haaretz. Or just on this pasuk of this that they by Sadaim, it says Vayichu is kol rechush Sadaim v'Amor v'es kol ochlam v'yilechu. So the Bermai Michayim in Parshas Lech Lech over there says L'chayra hini kam der Remachal nichlal b'rechush v'loma poratos b'pnei atzmai. He says interesting however, he says L'chayra Michael is included in the food, is included in the rechush, everything that they took. So why does the pasuk have to specify this by itself? And why doesn't it say that they took the women from the war, like it says? So why doesn't it refer to the nashim earlier in the pasuk? And he says that the Torah wants to speak b'lashon Nakiya, and that we know from Chazal that there were machana. We refer to nashim as achila, ki malach masher oichel, which is just a more appropriate way, a more tsanua, of you're talking about women, which the Torah doesn't necessarily always like to speak so elaborately about. So that's why he's not mefarish like that. But that was, he says, and he's medayik in the Psukim Vayter, and he says that that's dafka when they took them to take captive, but not when they gave them back for the captive. He says the Torah is not going to keep on going back and forth. It's one thing. We refer to the nashim b'derech achila, and so he says food is nichlal in rechush, and when the pasuk says v'eskol achlam, that's referring to the nashim, and the Bnei Yissaschar in the Agar the Kala says the same thing. Es is the rabbis neshayim, that are also called achlam kamoidat amar kimas alechem asher oichel, and this is very derech agav, but the Panim Yafis over there in pasuk Yerches brings that Avram Avinu and his people, that they were fighting this milchama against the 4 kings and the 5 kings. They brought kol min ma'achal v'yayin. They brought all kinds of things to eat and to drink. Like the pasuk says, "V'skal achlan v'yelechu," and it says, "Vayter rak es asher achlu hana orim." Only what the orim ate. And he says that since Avram Avinu was mekayim kol ha'Torah kula, was mekayim all the mitzvahs, he didn't want to be nana from the we didn't want to eat or be netted from the wine and the food that Malki Tzedek Melech Shalom brought from him, because he had a Pesach Hashash that it was Kilei HaKar. It's a very strange thing, because the Torah says Pentuk Dashamaleya. So you think that if you have two minim, it would be Asur Ba'ano. When you have Tvua and Yayin together, so that's why he didn't want to eat it. So he was Haitzi Lechem Yayin. When he was Haitzi Lech, he took it out and he showed him that this is Lechem Yayin, that's not Kilei HaKar, and it's okay for him to eat. But L'chayr, there's something very interesting over here about what's going on with this whole shmuz about the, with all the psukim about achila when it comes to a war, because the Rambam says in Hilchas Malachim Paraches Halacha Aleph, Chalutzei Tzava, the soldiers of the army, sheyichnusu b'gvul ha'akum, when they go into the non-Jewish quarters, v'yichbishum, and they'll conquer it, v'yashru mehem, and they'll take captors from there. Mutar lem lechel nevelis u'treifus u'basar chazir k'yotzeba. They're allowed to eat nevelis and treifus, and even basar chazir, and anything else like that in Yuraf, if they're hungry. V'lei matzah ma'yochel. V'lei matzah ma'yochel elu macholes elu asurim, v'chein shoysi yayin nesach, and they're allowed to eat any macholes asuris, all these macholes asuris that he mentioned, and they're also allowed to drink yayin nesach. And Mipir Shmo Lamdu Ubatam Lem Kol Tuv is even Arfei Chazerim Ukayotz Behem. Different parts of Dvarim Asurim that normally you're not allowed to eat. When it comes to Milchama, the soldiers have to sustain themselves, and they have to always be on the go and be ready to fight. So even if they find things that are not kosher, then they're allowed to be nene and eat from that. And all these psukim, they were really allowed to eat, so then why taka not? But it's mavur in the Rambam over there that the hemshech of the Rambam over there is talking about the Indian of Eishes Yifas Toyar. And l'chayr the ha'ar is like this. L'chayr it's pashut. That when they're going into Eretz Yisrael, they're going into Eretz HaKodesh, as we'll see in the hemshech, Hadvarim, they're going into a severe makum tumah with the shuv umasar, with tremendous kedusha and tremendous tara. And be'etzem ikradin, they could do like the Rambam, that they don't have to be careful with what they eat. They could eat whatever these goyim left them. Afilu arfei chazerim, batam leim kol tuv arfei chazerim kayoysev hem. Really, they could have been in it from that. But the idea why Yeshua was telling them that the hachonas hamacholim, 3 days before they go into Eretz Yisrael, is so that they don't have to be nana. They shouldn't. In a wartime, it has different rules and different regulations. And be'etzem me'ikradin, they could eat the treifus, the nevelos and treifus. Narvas, when they're going into Eretz Yisrael, they want to be mekadosh themselves. They want to be metar themselves. So you start to say, they want to go to the Frim Yeshua Sadin. They don't want to have to eat the Dvarim Tmeim. Yeshua tells them to be meichin tzeda for 3 days beforehand, kedei, that they should be able to go in, to be able to conquer Eretz Yisrael, Bekdusha, Tahara, and they shouldn't have any Tumtum Alev. And that's part of the Yeshua L'chayra got this idea from the fact that the Psukim before say that Layomer Sefer Torah Zeh Mipicha. Why Mipicha? Because a pad that speaks the very Torah shouldn't be a mouth that's taking in all kinds of Dvarim Asurim. Okay. Another pasuk about Achila when it comes to a war. Also we find by Avram Avinu pasuk state in Michut about Tzarechnal and Ekach Mikala Shalach, not going to take a string or a shoelace or anything from you, so that you shouldn't say that you made Avram wealthy. Again, we find that in the war, Avram Avinu is telling the king of Sodom, I don't want to have anything to do with anything that you're giving me. Don't give me anything, I'm not going to take it. Only what the Na'arim are going to eat. Meaning he really wasn't going to take anything from him, but he wanted his younger soldiers to be able to eat, to have kayach to fight, so he was allowed them to take. That's one thing. And Nachazachis, we have a Gemara Roshana, Tavchav Beis, the Mishnah, tzeda lahem. This is talking about the people that are going to say Edus HaChodesh in Yerushalayim. Tzeda lahem. If there's a big need for them, they're allowed to take sticks with them. And if it was a long road and they needed to take danishes with them, they could take food with them. Rashi says, "V'im tzida lehem, im yesh arvim b'derech," if they're arvim not with an ayin but with an aleph, which means ambushes, "Kumeva'ata tzida es nafshi." V'abai susim v'akusim, the people that were anti-Kiddush HaChodesh, hem hayu arvim lehem la'atvam, they would always try to ambush them to stop them, k'dei lahatas es hachachamim, to try to confuse the chachamim that they shouldn't have the Yamim Tovim and the Chadoshim B'Smanom. They would always try to stare it, as we know from other Gemaras also. And even though we've been talking about that צידה means food, but over here it's clear in the Gemara that in צידה lehem they could take maklas. But over here it sounds like more in צידה is a lashon of if they were going to get attacked, then they could take what they need to prevent them. L'chera, that's what צידה might mean in our context also. But if you look in the Balaturim in Parshas Vayechi and Mem Tes Yud Gimel, it says V'yarchosa al Tzidain. It says Tzidon without a vav. Ksiv Chaser Tzidon without a lashon tzeda. Shaya Maspik LaMozim v'Tzeda LiYisachar, that Zvulun would give Mozim v'Tzeda to Yisachar. So it's mashma that Mozim and Tzeda, two separate things. I mean, we say in the Shmir Shabbos, Mazon v'Tzeda Sbil and Nafshenu, that both Mazon and Tzeda are both something that satiate our nefesh. And there's noch a Balaturim in Parsh B'chukaisai that says L'Soiva, Dalud B'Mesorah. There's 4 psukim that say the same lashon. Hacha, V'achaltam Lachem B'chem L'Soiva. There's one pasuk that you'll eat your bread and with satiation. V'nos Na'aretz Peri V'achaltam L'Soiva. And noch a pasuk v'idach b'sheftenu al sir abazu b'chal lechem l'soiva v'idach tzeda sholach lem l'soiva. In Tehillim Ayin Ches, it says that the tzeda sholach lem l'soiva, that tzeda will be there for them to get satiated. So he says in all these psukim it's mentioning soiva with lechem or peris because it's talking about a makom yishuv. But when it's talking about the midbar, it says tzeda sholach lem l'soiva. That it doesn't say lechem, it doesn't say peris, but it says l'soiva dafka by tzeda, because you need to give them anything when they're in the midbar to have to be satisfied, because in the midbar there's nothing there. And it's interesting that the Targum in Tehillim over there says that tzeda is a lashon of zvadim. Mizvada l'cher comes from that. But the pashtus is that tzeda really means the food that's prepared, and to be meichelechem tzeda doesn't mean prepare yourself food. Mazon is food. Tzeda means food that's prepared, that's ready to eat. Because like we said before, when they would go to Milchama, they didn't have time to sit down to fry, to fry the fish or to smear the cream cheese on the sandwiches. You put your cream cheese on the sandwich before you go to the Milchama, so you don't have to deal with that. You don't have to deal with that before. You don't have to deal with that. B'shas ma'aseh, you're able to fight, and you can just eat when you need to eat. But by Milchama, it's not. Things are a little more chaotic. You don't have time to sit down and eat the way you should. Okay. Now, l'chayra, the concept of having food is that you should be able to fight the enemy with the kayach. And unfortunately, if the food gets finished up, then you'll be shvach, and then the enemy will be able to win. And we sort of know this from the Gemara Gittin, where the Gemara tells us that before the Churban, they were very careful to make sure that they had all the food that they needed. The Gemara says in Gittin and Daf Nun Vav that Kol Zman that the Bnei Yerushalayim had food before the Churban, they were stark and they were able to hold up. But once the food was destroyed, that was it. And l'chera, we find this as a tactic in Milchama altogether, that you cut off the food supply, and once you cut off the food supply, it makes them schwacher, then it's much easier to attack them. And just go through the Gemara real quick, that the Gemara says, Tzar la Tlashani, they were laying siege around Yerushalayim for 3 years. Hava Buhani Tlasa Asiri, there were these 3 wealthy people, like Dimon Ben Gurion, Ben Kalbu Savua, Ben Tzitzis HaKesses. These were the 3 people. Ben Gurion was Shanak the Lechama Bavura, which we spoke about when we spoke about that the sun stops for Yeshua as well. Ben Kalbu Savua, Shekala Nichnas Al Basic Shurav Kekel Basic Shuseveya. that anybody who went into his house hungry like a dog came out when he was satisfied. It's just interesting. They're talking about, being hungry during a war, but he was the one that made sure that even at this kufa, people were still being fed. Or it means that his clothing was very long, and it was schlepping on pillows. Or his, his clothes, he was a chashra shtadlon, and he was Isaac, to help the Yidden with talk to the Gedolei Raimi. So one of them said, "I'll have enough food for you with wheat and barley." The other one said, "I have enough wine and salt, mishcha and oil." And one of them said, "I have a lot of wood, so supply wood for the whole Yerushalayim." The Rabbanon praised the one that had said that he's going to give the wood. Rav Chisda would give the keys to his gabbai for anything, but the key to the storage house for the wood he wouldn't give him. He says that the wheat needs 60 keys for wood, meaning that the wood is much more chashuv, because that's going to keep them going for longer. So and there was enough food to last the whole Yerushalayim for 21 years. There were these no-goodniks. They wanted to make shalom with them. They didn't let. Maybe we should make war with the Romans. It's not going to work. And then they went and they burnt down all the storage houses of the wheat and barley. Then there was no food. They couldn't eat anything anymore, and there was a hunger. And then here's the story of Martha Bas Baisa. So as Asirta Yerushalayim, she was the wealthiest woman in Yerushalayim. She sent her messenger, bring me the best quality bread. By the time he got there, it was sold out. I said, this regular white bread, no fancy bread. So who got me that? By the time he got there, it was gone. This is like whole wheat bread. Go bring me that. And by the time he got there, that was gone. Also, it's barley bread. Go bring it for me. By the time he got there, it was gone. She took off her shoes. So let me go ahead and check what's going on. Maybe I'll find epis to es. She stepped on something disgusting and she died. Said about her, says the soft one and the sensitive one that didn't get a chance to even put her foot on the ground. It's very interesting because we had in the Pasuk Dalet that says and we're seeing that in the Zman HaChurban, this is a pasuk in the Teichicha. There's a matzav of also kaf ragla, which is the hepech of the Kamal Kamasha Tidr kaf raglechem. What was the story? Either she found the Gregors of Reb Tzadok that she ate, and it was, she was too sensitive to it, and she died. The Reb Tzadok Yosef Barban Shnin Betani, so Reb Tzadok fasted for 40 years. The Yerushalayim shouldn't get destroyed. When he would eat something, you're able to see it go down his digestive tract because he was so thin. I mean, if he had the kayach to eat, when he was so shrach, he didn't have kayach. When he had the kayach, they'd bring him a gregors, a fig, mayitz, and he would just suck out the juice. Mayitz mayit b'shadilu. He would suck out the juice and he would throw it out. So we see that the downfall of Yerushalayim came about in a very strong way because of the fact that they didn't have food to eat. And l'char we could explain this with the pasuk. Pasuk state in Kriya Shema, we say it every day, 2 times a day. That Hashem will get angry at you and Hashem will stop the Shemaim and there won't be any rain. And the ground won't give any of its peiros, won't give any of its produce. And you'll quickly get destroyed and be ran out of the land, the good land that Hashem gave you. Rashi explains, I'll call Shar Yisurim Agal Eschem and Adama. On all other Yisurim, I'm going to send you out of the land. That's what caused you to sin. Marshal Lamelech, it can be compared to a king Sheshalach B'nei L'Beis HaMikdash, sent his son to a party, to a chasana. V'yoshev u'mafkidai, and he was telling him, and he was commanding him, Al Tarichal Yosem Mitzarchecha, don't eat more than you have to. Should should come back clean, come back neat, come back feeling good. And the son wasn't careful. The son ate and drank way more than he should have. And he threw up. The ton of Eskalban Amasiba, and he made a scene, and he dirtied the whole party. They took him by his hands and feet, and they threw him out of the palace. They threw him out of the chasana. And we know the pasuk says at the beginning of Parshas Hazinu Hashamayim Ba'Dabera, that the Shamayim should listen to Sishma Oretz and Refi, and the land should hear the Imers. Zok Rashi, Hazinu Hashamayim Shani Masher Behem B'Yisrael. He says the Shamayim should listen that I'm giving a hasra to Klal Yisrael. V'tiu atem edam b'daber, and you should be the testimony. Shekach amarti lahem, that this is what I told them. Shatam tiu edam, that you should be my testimony. V'chein v'tishma oretz, and the same is true for v'tishma oretz. Lama heid b'hem shemayim b'oretz. Why did Hashem need the shemayim of the oretz to be the testimony? Omar Moshe ani basa b'dam, l'mochar ani meis. Moshe says, I'm not here forever. Tomorrow I'm gone. Im yami Yisrael lekebalnu aleinu bris. If the Yidden are going to say that they were never makabel the bris from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's going to be machish them? Therefore Hashem made the Edom Shemayim and Aretz. Why? Because they are Edom Shem Kayamim La'olam. Because they're Kayam forever. And they're never going away. So they could always testify that if Klal Yisrael was makabel on them, if Klal Yisrael wasn't makabel on them to do the Torah mitzvahs, V'oid Shem Yizku, because if they're going to do the mitzvahs and they're going to be zeicha, Yavayu Edom Yitnu Schara, send the Edom themselves will come and give the schar. Hagefen Tachaspiria, Va'aretz Titin Yavula, the grapevine will produce its fruit and the land will produce its produce. Vashamayim Yitnu Talam, and the tal will come from Shamayim B'Mischaibu Tia B'M Yad Edom Tchila. The halach is Yad Edom Tia B'M Rishayna. Who punishes the people and the person in Bezdin? It is the Edom. Yad Edom Tia B'M Rishayna. So who are the Edom? The Shamayim and the Aretz. So that's a pshat in Ba'otzar Shamayim Lo Yeh Motor, and that's V'Adam Lo Sitin Esivula, because they are the Edom of Hazinu Hashamayim B'Daber B'Seshma Aretz and Rifi. And if they're not going to listen to the Dvar Hashem, and this, and the pasuk says that they're going to get chased, they're going to get destroyed from the land. It's going to be al yedei umas. So the question is, why does Rashi have to say that they're going to get punished al yedei umas davka? Why can't it be that it's going to be something that's going to happen? Some natural disaster could happen to them, or Hashem will punish them. Why is it davka al yedei umas? But it seems that the pshat is like this. It's not necessarily the pshat that the Goyim are going to come and wage a war with them and drive them out of the land, but because the Shemaim of the Eretz won't be producing, it won't rain, and the male of the produce won't be growing, there's not going to be anything for them to eat, and they're going to be very, very shvach. And Melo, when the Goyim are going to come, Chas v'Shalom, it will be much easier for them to take over, like the Gemara says in Gittin. And that's the pshat and why it says Yad Edom Tibay B'Rishayna La Misay Yad Kaladam Ba'Achrayna, that the Einish itself comes from the Edom, which are Shemayim and the Aretz, and that's what the Einish itself is coming from, the fact that it didn't rain, so then it allows the enemy to come and take hold of them. And the Geradia explains that you have to say that this is the pshat, what Rashi says, because you're not going to say that the pasuk means Yad Edom Yiyabam. It says Vavadatem. And that doesn't say that that's necessarily going to be through Shemayim Ba'aretz. So, therefore Rashi explains that this is also going to be Al Yidei Shemayim. And that's why the pasuk says after that, Vavadatem Mahera, and that's going to be Al Yidei the Umas. Because if you don't have what to eat, then you don't have kach to fight. And then it's Yodua, that if it's very, very dry, it's very easy to light a fire and to destroy everything in the fields. And even if there was produce there, but it's all going to get burnt and it's going to be gone. And the Torah says, it's just interesting to show, the Torah says in Simon Tov Kofayin Tes that the concept in the Birkas HaGeshamim in the winter time, and we say Marsha Racha Merdagashin, we say saying Talamat Lavracha, and we say saying Talamat Lavracha Pnei Adama, Sheimeira V'Atzila Shona Zumi Kol Davara, we call Mine Mashchis, and we call Mine Peronos, V'Aselecha Tikva V'Achris Shalom. Now we don't say this, but I believe it is printed in some Sidurim in the Nusach Svar that we daven that the land should be protected, and it's not just protected, from the weather, but it's protected that the people shouldn't be able to do anything to change the matzav of the land. We call davara, we call mine mashchis, we call peronus, and that there should be hope and achris, and it shall last, and there will be peace in the land. Now with this, we'll move on to talk about what state in Tanut Ve'Elio, in Perek Yud Ches, and state the following. Did the Klal Yisrael need food? Weren't they eating the man? So what's the pshat that they needed tzeda? Do tshuva that you should go into the Eretz Shanosan HaKadosh Baruch Hu La'avoseichem v'toichlem mitvuas ha'Eretz shenemar v'yoichlem mitvuas Eretz Kenan v'Shana Hahi. It says that you have to do tshuva before you go into Eretz Yisrael. And what's the pshat that you have to do tshuva before you go into Eretz Yisrael? So that's why they had to prepare macholim, and they weren't able to eat like the Rambam says that to be mechet, that they should go into Eretz Yisrael with kedusha. And we have to talk about this a little bit to be mazra bissel v'susach and what's going on. And it's something to think about why they needed 3 days of hachana before they went to Eretz Yisrael. We find a similar concept by Matan Torah, a hachana for 3 days. And like the Tanit Ve'Elio starts off, he says, in writes out to Lilmai, the Chavetz out of Divrei Torah, if you want to learn and your desire is for Divrei Torah, go back to the beginning of the Inyan. Tchilas Maisim Kulam, the beginning of all the Maisim, Shamdu Avesenu al Har Sinai, when our fathers stood at Har Sinai, L'kabla Leimes HaTorah, they wanted to be Mikabla the Torah, Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Moshe, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, Sheyomer L'Yisrael, that he should tell Klal Yisrael, Sheyekatru Atzmam Shnei Yamim, that they should be Mekadosh themselves for 2 days, Shenemar V'kidashtam Hayom U'Machar, that you should sanctify today and tomorrow. Ba Moshe ba'amalahem, Moshe came and told them, Sheyechinu v'sa'atzmam shlesh yamim, that they should prepare themselves for 3 days. And he says it's not that Moshe just, and it wasn't just Moshe's idea. He told Klal Yisrael, separate yourself from Averis, just things that aren't nice, aren't pleasant, aren't in the Ruach of the Torah. That you should be tahar and you should be separated at least 3 days from these Averis by the time you get to stand by Har Sinai. It wasn't just Moshe that told them this concept that you shouldn't do Averis, but you should be Matar themselves. But also Yeshua said to them that they should separate from Averim Megezel, Makaldar, Machur, Yubikdusha, Matarik, Shiavar, Biyarde. And then they should, they'll have a Kedusha and Tara when they go across the Yarden. And that's the idea of the Tzeda. And that's the idea of the Hachanas Tzeda. That you should take this with them, that they should take whatever Madrekas they're going to be kind of now, and the Hachana of these 3 days to be Mechen, to prepare themselves to go into Eretz Yisrael. Now we already explained in an earlier shir that when they go through the Yarden, Eretz Yisrael is surrounded by water on all sides. Wherever you go is water, because today to get into Eretz Yisrael, you need to have a Tara. You need to have a Tara b'mayim. And the L'chera, the Parsha Pshat is like this. It's Yedua b'Shem the Ramban that the Iker Kiyum HaTorah HaMitzvahs is in Eretz Yisrael, and you can't compare the Kiyum of Torah Mitzvahs and Chutz La'aretz to the Mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael. Some Sefer writes in Gittin and Dafim Dalad a Pachid the Gittin. He says that in Chutz La'aretz, Ein Mekayim Shum Mitzvah. A person in Chutz La'aretz is not Mekayim any mitzvahs. The Kol Adar b'Chutz La'aretz K'misha Ein Le'elekah. A person who lives in Chutz La'aretz as if he doesn't have a God. I feel the Kriya Shema Shakar b'Chutz La'aretz, even the Kriya Shema that he says in Chutz La'aretz, Einek Kekar Eretz Yisrael. It's incomparable to the Kriya Shema, the Kabbalah Samach Shemayim, to any mitzvahs that he can do in Eretz Yisrael. Ki Garshuhu Mestapech Ben Achalas V'Zeh Musar Gadol. He says because we were chased out of our Nachla from dwelling in the Nachla of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's a gewaltige Sache. I mean, the Chagisha, they say over also b'shem the Chasam Sofer that the whole Golus was Kedai to be able to have 2 days Yantiv. Eretz Yisrael only has 1 day. And when I was a little kid, I used to say that maybe the reason why in Chutz La'aretz we have 2 days is because we don't have the Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. It seems that the Chasam Sofer is saying this concept that in Eretz Yisrael you only need 1 day to be misakin and to be kind of the madrigas that you need to be kind of with just 1 day of Yantiv. But in Chutz La'aretz, it takes us 2 days what it takes in Eretz Yisrael to do 1 day. We know that the concept of Kabbalah Samach Shemayim is also shaykh very much to Eretz Yisrael, like it says in Teres Kehanim. Pasuk says, "Losis lechem es Eretz Canaan, lios lechem leLekim." That I'm giving you Eretz Canaan, kedei that Hashem should be our Elikim. Mikanamru, those wegen steht, kol yoshev Eretz Yisrael lekabla al Malchus Shemayim. Person who lives in Eretz Yisrael is mekabla on himself al Malchus Shemayim. You'll ask what about all the people in Eretz Yisrael today that are not mekabla al Malchus Shemayim? There's hope for them. There's hope for them. Maybe one day they'll realize that there should be mekabla Malchus Shemayim. And Pashtus, that it's going to be easier for them to be mekabla Malchus Shemayim because they're closer to the Kedusha. Steht euch in the Medrash, Nosati lechol zaracha charecha eretz megorecha v'skol eretz Canaan lechuz ha'seilam v'yisi lechem le'elikim mekablim banecha lakusi. If your children are mekabel my lakus my malchus shemayim and yaya lechem le'elika le'patrei, I'll be there for you. I'll take care of you if in love. Le'yaya lechem le'elika le'patrei. Then, if you're not going to be in Eretz Yisrael, then you're not going to do the mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael, I'm not going to be there for you. The comment to Eretz Yisrael, the requirement is that the Makabel Torah mitzvahs. The comment to Eretz Yisrael, the Makabel Torah mitzvahs, Hashem says, no different than L'chaira. I mean, I don't know if this is what Chazal say over here, but it's definitely clear that any Mokum where there is a Shteitin Meiri in the Ksubis, that a Mokum that has a yeshiva and that has people that are being Isaac B'Torah, that's people always want to get buried in Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because it's a Ma'ila, has a Ma'ila Kedushas Haaretz. But if a person lives in a place, even in Chutz La'aretz, but it has Torah there, it has your Shemayim there, and people are Mekabel Omach Shemayim, Torah mitzvahs, so it starts his hand over there, then the Kvur over there is Kekava Eretz Yisrael. So Shteit Meiri at the end of Ksubas. And the Bar Moshe brings a lesson of a Zoyar, the Zara Kadisha, La'ara Kadisha Salka, Ushchinta Be'asra Yasva V'hai Ba'Italia. That the Zara Kadisha, Klal Yisrael, goes into Ara Kadisha, the Eretz Yisrael, that's Kadosh, and the Shechina is all over here, and the Shechina dwells over here in this place, and they're totally in each other. Torah, the Shechina is totally in Klal Yisrael doing the mitzvahs. So when Klal Yisrael is holding at the point and they're ready to go into Eretz Yisrael, Yeshua is being mitzvah them that they should be making themselves, they should prepare themselves ruchnistic, or on a ruchnistic level, similar to the hachana that was required by Matan Torah, because they're being mekabel on themselves al Malchus Shemayim, and not just al Malchus Shemayim, but also the Kabbalah Sol mitzvahs that you could do, that they could only do in Eretz Yisrael, that you can't do anywhere else. In Yalkut state, Lechivev mikol ha'arotzes el Eretz Yisrael, shenemar Eretz Asher Hashem lekecha Torah shoysa, haratem nechnasim l'seichel v'nas hadrisha. The concept of Eretz Yisrael is that we should be constantly being Derish Hashem. Eretz Asher Hashem lekecha Torah shoysa. Hashem is Derishit. Hashem is money from us to be mekayim the mitzvahs over there. And haratem nechnasim l'seichel v'nas hadrisha. We are there to constantly be Derish Hashem, Shenema v'yitel lechem artus goyim, but we're Yishmer chukov terosu v'yinsoru. The whole concept of Eretz Yisrael is Shmir Satar v'amitzvahs. It's no different than China, and it's very sad. You know, Hashem is hinted that we have tremendous yeshivas and tremendous kedusha going on there also. The Bar Moshe goes right there, and he brings another interesting nekuda, and he says that the reason why the beginning of the conquering of Eretz Yisrael was on Shabbos also, so it wasn't stopped by chance that it was on Shabbos. It specifically started on Shabbos, as we're going to see later in Bקרב, to be the same idea as Matan Torah, which is also on Shabbos, like the Gemara says, Shabbos Pevav Amud Beis, the Kuli Alma b'Shabbos and the Torah Yisrael. The Shabbos and the Torah are connected to each other. Like it says that the Shabbos is Eidos, and somebody that's Meshaker v'Shabbos, means somebody that's not Mekayim Shabbos, doesn't recognize the potency of the Kedusha Shabbos, is Kilo is Kaifer B'Chala Torah Kula, the Mela that Kliyim Zibaseh. And we know that Eretz Yisrael is Shaykh to this also, like it's stated in the Torah, Simon Reish Tzadi, in the name of the Medrash, it says, Amra Torah L'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Torah says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rabbeinu Shalom, Kishiyichnos to Yisrael Aretz, when Klal Yisrael is going to go to Eretz Yisrael, Zer Rotz L'Karma, Zer Rotz L'Sadeh, this one runs to his Karam, this one runs to his field, but it's Simon Reish Tzadi, because it talks about Rotz. The Rotz, Eretz is Lashon of Ratzon, because we go to Eretz Yisrael to do the Ratzon Hashem. V'ani matahei olai. Hashem says, the Torah says to Hashem, what's going to be with me? Omar lo yesh li zug shani mezavig loch. V'shabbos shmai. Says you're worried about the Torah that they're Isaac in Zeros L'Karma, Zeros L'Sadeh, where everyone's taking care of the Malachis Gashmiyas. I'm going to give you a zivug, that Shabbos, that's when they're going to be bought up on the Malacha, and that's when you're going to be able to be Isaac the Torah. So before in Chazal, that Talmud Chacham was called Shabbos, and we know from the Gemara Brachos and Mitzvah Shem, which we'll explain a little more by Riches in the next year Mitzvah Shem, that the concept is that the person who's Isaac Batar via start to side is Malach the Nasai de Acherim. He doesn't have to do the dirty work; he gets taken care of by himself. And so even more than that, the Shabbos is Lashon Tashuv. Shabbos is Lashon Shav. That Akol Shav Lam Kaime, everything goes back to its original state. That's why Klal Yisrael had to do tshuva before they go into Eretz Yisrael. Another nakuda to think about the way the Hemshech, the Tanit Velio goes. Asur tshuva, you should do tshuva kedei shetichnesu la'aretz, kedei that you should be able to go into Eretz Yisrael. Shanasan lachem HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'teichlu mitzvos aretz. You should be able to eat from the tvos aretz. Do tshuva so you could eat. That the hachana is that you should be able to eat from the tvos aretz. It's a strange thing. Why do you need to do extra tshuva that you should be able to eat from the tvos aretz? They're eating the man. The man is from the highest madreg is shaykh. So what's the concern about the man? But this is what it is, because bisman shayu echel man, and while they were eating the man, memela they were on the gevaldige madreg of tshuva, and memela they were on the gevaldige madreg of hachina. Like the Gemara says in Yuma, and if I in hey darsing the pasuk is there, God lova, God is shedaimel hagoda, shamesheches esliba shaladam kamayim. That God is Lashon of Haggadah, that's Meshach a person to like Mayim, which is a Lashon of Hachna, and Lavan is Shamal ben Avay Nisem Shal Yisrael, who whitens the sins of the Yidden, meaning that they were always in a matzav of Tshuva v'Hachna. And Rashi says, Mitech she'yutayagim Shemal ha'yerid man l'machar ha'yimishadim libad l'makar. The concept of the man was the betachan that they had to have in a Amunah and betachan HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they're going to have one for tomorrow. The Mela, they were forced to be Meshav themselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we know famously from the Tanchum and Parshas B'Shalach that Leinit Natar Lidrash, Allah Loich Le'amon, Shle'hayu Lem Tzarech Lo Lem Lochav Le'Leschera, they didn't need to do anything, they had Amon, everything was Masuda for them. So what's the issue? So why do you have to do tshuva? They're eating the man right now, they're going into Eretz Yisrael. The tshuva is here. Now that they're going to stop eating the man, that they're going to be going into Eretz Yisrael without the man, then they had a man from Yud till Tazayin, like we saw in Rashi. But after that, Daf Tshuvaton, because we don't have this automatic tshuva machine called the man, and they're going to be missing this segulas tshuva from the man that was a constant by them. And Be'emes, Shtei and Chazal, that when the man stopped falling, it was very painful for Klal Yisrael. They had real cravings to it. Sounds like physical cravings, like the Sufri says in Parshas Baloischa. Mahadad hazeh hatinik mitzdar b'shah she perish mimenu. Just like when a child when the mother has to take the child away from nursing, the child is mitzvah. So too, Klal Yisrael was mitzvah when they had to stop eating the man. Mela, that's why Yeshua had to be mezaris them to make food, to prepare. Why? That you have to be mechazik in hachno, and you have to be mechazik in emunah b'tochen for 3 days that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is on and mefarnes. And it's not just that, you have the man and Mamela. We know that every day it was another avodah to know that tomorrow they're getting the money. Hashem said he could have stopped it. So it's in Chazal that the snake, the nachash, has food wherever he goes. He never has to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for it. So that's the biggest klala, because he never has to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the money. Every day we have to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where am I going to get my next meal from? But we know that when we have betachon v'estarvus sign, then we're never going to be lacking anything, and Hashem is going to give us everything that we need. Pasuk steht in Tilim, Lu am ishe me'ali, alavai, my nation will listen to me, Yisrael v'drachai alechu, and Klal Yisrael will follow in my ways, kematavei machnia, v'altzarei moshe yodi, that I'll be machnia their enemies, and I'll be able to punish those that are mitzar them, v'yachileyu meichel levchito, mitzur devachas b'yeka, and I'll feed them from the fattiest wheats, and from the rock of honey I will satisfy them. Because be'etzem, this is all coming from the fact that Yisrael b'zrachai alechu. The only reason why they had them on this whole time was because of the kiyum Torah v'amitzvos. Like it states in the Medrash on the pasuk, "Hineni mamti lechem lechem min hashamayim." I'm going to make it rain lechem min hashamayim for you. Adov dechsiv lechu lachmu b'lachmi u'shesu b'yein mosachti. That you should go and eat from my bread and go drink from my wine. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Migarim lechem lechem min haman v'lishtes me'be'er." What schus did you have that you could eat the man and you could drink water from the be'er? Because you're makabel on yourself the chukim and the mishpatim. K'may shenemar, like the pasuk says, "Sham samlei chayku mishpat, have b'schus lachmi nataltem lachem shalmon." The schus you followed my lechem, meaning my halachas, you were able to get the lechem of the man. U'esus yayin shemasachti, and because of my wine that you poured, meaning that you weiter makabel the chukim and the mishpatim, shesisa mebe'er shenemar shtubi yain masachti. So to over here, Yeshua is telling them also, if you're makabel on yourself to be mekayim the Torah, if you start to zayin, so then, like we said, that the ikar kiyum HaTorah is in Eretz Yisrael, so then everybody's going to have parnasa, and everyone's going to have what they need. And it's very interesting that the Noam Elimelech says in the Parshas B'Shalach, on the pasuk, this pasuk that we're talking about, the Mamti lechem lechem min hashamayim, that hineni means something that's constant. Zav harahoy v'tamid. Hashem says that this day you say that you need parnasa, I'm ready to give you parnasa at any time, whenever you need, whenever you want, every single day. But when a person is lacking betachon and he goes out of the proper ideas of betachon, and v'loktu dvarim b'yaymai, then every day he's going to have to be mechadish and numahalach how to get his food, because if he would be b'yterech b'Hashem every day, then his parnasa would be flowing regularly every day, and he would get it. And that's why Yeshua is telling them הכינו לכם צידה, that the tzeda and the food, you should always view it as if it's something that you have, and you shouldn't have to be worried about tomorrow, because you know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give you what you need tomorrow as well. And over here also, that dafka through achilos gashmius, and really it's very interesting. This big makam, big kasha that should be bothering everybody, and that is that when they're in the midbar, that's when they have the man. They come to Yisrael, 5 days later, no more man. The man is such a heilig gazach, like we spoke before. Eretz Yisrael is such a heilig gazach. Why can't it be that they'll have the man throughout their time in Eretz Yisrael? If they're doing the Torah and the mitzvahs properly, why should they lose out on the man? But think about it like this. Go back to what we said from the Sufri in Parshas Ba'alaischa, that when a child nurses from the mother, he has a lot of tsar when he pulls away, when the mother pulls away, right? But that's a baby. 40 years in the desert, Ein Adam Amid Al Das Rabbe Rabbaim Shana. You're not a baby anymore. You're mature enough to go on your own. This is going to be the next year to focus on this more, right? The same way we know from the Gemara Nida that a baby learns Kol Tarukula b'Mayimai when he comes out he's Meshakach. What's the point, right? But that's because he's a baby. Now you have to do the avoid on your own. Lechtech achra b'midbar. It was Avas Kulei Sayach Lechtech achra b'midbar Beretz Leizerua. Comes to Eretz Yisrael, it's not Eretz Leizerua anymore, and it's not Lechtech achra b'midbar anymore. You're in a matzav where you're grown up. You're independent. The whole concept is that a person should be independently believing and being Baiteach Hashem without having to rely on anything else. And L'char is so interesting because it goes like this. Goes that if you have something that's Kol Kulei Ruchni, it's Ma'ir to Tshuva, so Avadu, that's the man, right? But to take something that's Megusham and to be Maile to Madrega Ruchnis, and for that to be Ma'ir to Madregas, that's a lot greater than something that's Ruchnistic Be'etzah. And as I state in Emily Melech, that he says that it's Tzaddik while he's davening, Savad is being Isaac in a Inyan Ruchni. He's B'teikus, B'kdusha, B'machshavas Tahiris, with a certain chlorikite. But when it comes to Achila, which is a Davar Gashmi, he has to be Meschazik, and he has to be Ma'ametz, to be Mekadesh himself more and more when he's eating, to connect himself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it comes to us that in a certain Eifin, when a tzaddik is eating, he's being Mekadesh himself even more than when he's davening. And L'chaira, the concept is that Tefillah is a Davar Ruchni, like the Man, it's a Davar Ruchni, and it's such a Shaykhis to Gashmi. It's Kulei Mileila. Still coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even though the man came with the schus of the Shmiras HaTorah v'Hamitzvos, but Hashem didn't have to make it an Asav Ruchnistic Haifen. It could have been that they had pizza wherever they went. Or why did it have to be man? That the whole concept of it was Ruchnistic. But that's the idea, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being making us for the next step. But the Ikar of the man was the Ruchni Shabbai. And that, it's interesting because the Gemara says that in Ksubas, that after 2 years or 4 years, it's big shayla in the Gemara, my mother shouldn't nurse anymore. So when they came to the Yarden, it was straight side to stop. And when it comes to going into Eretz Yisrael, so they have to be making tzeda, that they have to do something, they have to prepare, they have to take a davar gashmi. Meaning they're living everything a matzav of Kulei Ruchni. Moshe Rabbeinu is not here anymore. Now they have to take whatever gashmis they have and be mehabachil into Ruchnis. And that's really what the avoid is when they're going into Israel. Because they don't have man anymore. Okay. The Nachazak we could say is that the man was the schus of Moshe, and Klal Yisrael was able to be mekayim all the mitzvahs because Moshe was the one that gave it over to them. And this chelik of Moshe and each and every year, the Mamela, when they're doing the mitzvahs, when they're l'chul lachmu b'lachmi and shesubi and mosachti, that in and of itself is coming from the motivation that Moshe Rabbeinu gave everybody to do the mitzvahs also. Mamela, when Moshe Rabbeinu is not here anymore, then the man is nostalgic. Nachazach we could say that many times the avodah is that a yid or the yidden has to go through a makum tuma, has to go through a certain cheshach to bring out a certain kedusha in that place, whether it's a physical place, a literal place, or not. But that birur is called seder. Like we're trapping the kedusha from these places, and we're being mila this kedusha, and that's why they had to do this to the best from shayach, and that's the pshat ivru b'kerav hamachana. That they to go through the machana to bring out, to go through the tumah, to go through these areas to bring out all the nitzitzes hakedusha v'yistartzasa. Okay, one last thing is Yodua saying Nacha Nakud and the idea why they had to make a hachana to eat for the Tuas Oretz. So you do have the Divrei Abach and Simarei Ches, where the Torah is talking about the halachas of the bracha of Me'en Shalish. Ve'en lo einrei. Don't say B'Kedusha of Tahara in Birkas Vein Shalish. Tema, sagt the Bach. Hallo Kedusha Sa'aretz Hanishba B'Kedusha Sa'aretz El Yoino Hinishbas Gam B'Periseha. So why shouldn't you say it? Avada, the Kedusha of the Paris of Eretz Yisrael, is coming from a Kedusha El Yoino, and it has a hashpa on the Paris also, that get nourishment from the Kedusha Sashchina, that Sheikhin B'Karav Aretz. That's what it says at the end of Parashas Masev, L'Satame Sa'aretz Ashertem Yeshvim Ba, Asher Anik Sheikhin B'Seicha, Ki Ani Hashem Sheikhin B'Teich B'nei Yisrael. And it says in Titameas, in Titmes Sa'aretz, it says if you're going to make the land Tameh, so then the Tumah is going to be Nimshach, and the Tumah is going to go not just into the Eretz itself, but into the Paris itself. And when the Shekhinah is going to leave, the Shekhinah is going to leave the land itself, the physical earth, and it's also going to leave the Paris. And when the Shekhinah is going to leave, it's going to be Mikarav Ha'aretz Ashani Sheikhem B'Seicha Mamish. That's the Lashon of the Bach. But Gufa Ha'aretz Nistalka Mepnei HaTumah. It says there's an inherent Kedusha in the physical land of Eretz Yisrael, and when people do Averis, the Tumah is going to go into that, and it's going to remove the Kedusha from there. And that's going to cause the Yisilu Kashchina from Klal Yisrael. Get out the Heichal Hashem Hema. Till now, there was a matzah of Heichal Hashem, Hoyu B'nei Yisrael. It was told they were, they were doing mitzvahs, and they were doing things what they should. The Shechina Haitza Shar B'Kirba Mamish. And Va'ata Ba'achim Le'Peres HaYenkim Mitumas HaAretz Astalka Shechina. Says, so to speak, if there's poison, let's give a marshal, if there's poison in the soil where you're planting the seed, it's going to be garem, that the fruit itself is going to grow poisonous. So he says if there's tumah in the aretz, it's going to be nimshach, the tumah into the peris also. And when you're going to be eating that peri, it's going to be mashpia tumah on you. And you have to be careful when you do that. When you eat the peris, anu nizayim mikdushas hashchina umitaharasa v'nisba mituva, and that's why we have to say that. And the pshat in this is, like it states in Pasuk in Yirmiyah, V'avi eschem al eretz HaKarmel lechel pirya betuva, that you should come to the eretz HaKarmel, which is fresh and juicy fruits, to eat the peris betuva, v'tavayu, v'tatamu es arti v'nachlasi samti l'toyeva. That you came and you were metame my land, and my nachli, you turned it into something of disgust, you turned it into toyeva. And that's what the Bach is saying. That if you're metame the eretz, you're also going to be metame the peris. Shtei noch them in Tur, that and he says, the lashon of the Torah you shouldn't say it. She'ein lachmed ha'aretz b'shvil pirya b'tuva, elol kaim mitzvos atliyas ba. But you shouldn't say that because why should a person have a chemda for the aretz because of the fruits? A person should want to go to Eretz Yisrael to be mekayim the mitzvos that are totally in Eretz Yisrael, and that's like the Gemara says in Seit and Daf Yudalim. Neima nisava Moshe Rabbeinu lekanis Eretz Yisrael. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu nisava to go into Eretz Yisrael? He wanted to eat the fruits. There are many mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael is mitzvah, and you can it's only shaykh to be mekayim them in Eretz Yisrael. And the Beis Yosef of the writes to B'miyasha D'Lashon HaTorah, he says, "Eina tachlis b'shvil ha'achila." The tachlis of Eretz Yisrael isn't that we could eat fruit. And the ideas are what we say in the brach afterwards. When Varechecha Allah b'kedusha v'tahara, the tachlis is that we should be able to make a bracha on the fruits b'kedusha v'tahara. How is a shaykh to make a bracha on something b'kedusha v'tahara? Al yidei the shmiras hamitzvos, it puts a kedusha v'tahara into the land, that puts a kedusha v'tahara that's mashpia kedusha v'tahara into the fruit itself. Now, l'cher we could go back to something that we spoke many, many times before. We mentioned the Avei Nachal that said a vart that the Shleshas halachim halachas shenshtachu b'me'avle shel Moshe was reingepflanzt in the land of Eretz Yisrael. So somebody who's eating from Paris Aretz is being nana from that Torah that was neshtachlich b'me'avle shel Moshe, and will bring back that shechah and bring it to a certain Torah, and it was planted with the matzav of Kalmalka Masher Tidrach Kafraglchem, and the brach is that we should take a bizeichet and v'rachicha aleha b'kedusha uve tahara.